Welcome everybody to 3D Printer Chat. I'm your host Chris Garrett and I'm here today with Evan Morgan of Model 3D Evan. That's youtube.com/Model 3D Evan. And you'll have seen Evan around on the 3D printing groups, and we've invited him to talk about all the things that he does, all the fascinating work he does, and how he got into 3D printing. So, hello Evan, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent. So, I just gave a really lame introduction. Can you tell us what it is you do and why I'm so fascinated in what you do?
Do you mean in terms of kind of what I do as a hobby or what I do as a living or what?
Both, because I found everything you do fascinating. So, first of all, as a living, you make cool stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm a self-employed model maker specializing in resin casting and silicon molding.
So that's why everybody should be interested, because you don't just dabble around with this, you actually do it seriously you get paid for it, you're an expert.
Yeah, paid to mess around with sticky glue. Yeah.
It looks like it's kind of dangerous glue because your profile picture has you looking like Darth Vader.
Yeah, you gotta wear a mask. There's a lot of like harsh chemicals and different kind of catalysts and stuff that can like very much kill you.
Yeah, so we should get into that in a bit, but also you're a 3D printer hobbyist, obviously, that's why also you're on this channel. So how did you get into 3D printing? What was it that led you? Was it the career or was it something else?
Well, I've always been, even before I became a self-employed model maker, I've always been interested in kind of like sculpting, clay sculpting. I did ceramics in college and all that kind of stuff. And I went to university for computer games design. I dropped out of the first year, I got bored. But I've always been interested in kind of like the 3D modeling side of it. So, I mean, I wasn't really kind of looking into it as much. I didn't know any of the YouTube channels. I didn't know about Joel or anything at the time. And I can't remember what website it was on. I just saw one pop up and it was the XYZ DaVinci 1.0A. And I mean, obviously I knew nothing, so I was dumb and I bought it and it was a pile of crap. But I mean, at the time, it was amazing. You know, I was getting prints out of ABS and I was loving it and just like, yeah, I mean, the best investment I ever did. And so I bought that and then it kind of snowballed and then, yeah, I just kept going really.
Yeah, your first printer is often like your first car. It's like you love it because it's yours, but then you're kind of ashamed of it as well.
Well, at the time, I thought it was great. You mean, because I didn't, obviously the Prusa Mark II wasn't out and stuff, and I didn't really know my printers. So, you mean, I was just kind of, all I knew was from other people's kind of pictures and stuff. So I was just printing little bits and bobs out and just, I was well happy with it.
Yeah, so you've got like a full workshop, right? You're not like me who was in this spare room with, cramming things in. You've got a proper workshop with full manly materials and power tools.
I've got, for my workshop for like work, I've got kind of like it's like an 8-foot shed kind of thing in the garden. So it's not ideal, but it's better than kind of what I was working in. But yeah, I've got my kind of messy stuff, my resins and stuff out there. And then I've got a double room in my house for kind of printers and computers and camera gear and such. Right.
So walk us through what you have got, because I'll not spoil the newest one that you've just received, but you've got a good collection there, right?
Yeah, I don't tend to use much of them, but yeah, I've got, as of next week, I'll have 9 3D printers, but yeah, I've got a CMC Orion, which I managed to get on eBay for about £200, which is like unreal. Cool. The guy said it was knackered, it wouldn't work. It arrived and basically it was clogged with ABS, and then I've cleaned it out, put a new E3D in it, and it works great.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pro tip for everybody listening. 3D printers are a little bit like exercise equipment, right? Or guitars. People find out they're not brilliant at it right away, and then they put them on eBay.
Yeah, he had no idea. I was asking questions to kind of gauge of how damaged it was, whether it was repairable and such, and he had absolutely no idea at all. So, that was a hell of a bargain.
So did you get a printer for your birthday?
My birthday? No. That'd be daft. I've got enough printers now. I'm getting... yeah. My wife gets a bit annoyed every time I mention more printers.
Yeah, my wife just put a picture on Facebook today to say she's a 3D printing widow. So, so you've got your you mentioned your DaVinci and you mentioned your eBay find. What else you got?
I've got a recent is my Prusa Mark II that I bought off a friend. But I mean, I love that thing. That's my go-to printer. It's just so reliable. It's just, I mean, when you're sat here thinking I've got something to print, if there's nothing going on that, I mean, that's my go-to.
Same with me actually, and it's weird because I went through a phase of not using it, and then when I went back to it, I was like, "Why have I been neglecting this machine?" Because it just prints. It's great for that. I got my CR10, and that was my new obsession for a little while, and I've just gone back to the Prusa now.
Nice. I've got a Dynamo 3D 1 Pro, which was sent to me for review on my channel. But I've had nothing but problems with it. Not kind of bad mouthing the company or anything. I just think I think there was an issue with E3D, and it's been kind of one thing after another. So so I've done the unboxing on that, and I've never actually got decent prints out of it. It's been constant issues. So that's going back next week for repair, I think. So hopefully when I get that back, because that's meant to be an amazing printer, like the fastest print in the world or something. It's just it's meant to be a beast. So I'm hoping that they can repair it and get it back to me, and I can actually use it.
Yeah, fast is something that we really desperately need.
but you've got that kind of... Go on.
No, go on.
You've got that kind of thing between, like, do you want it fast or do you want it really high quality? Because most of my stuff, I kind of take into silicon molding and stuff, so it needs to be the best it can be. So kind of fast isn't really, too much of an issue for me.
Yeah, and talking about silicon molding and stuff, resolution is super important. And you've got two Wanhao D7s, right?
I do. I've got the V1. I was actually the first person to receive them, like out of like everyone, which was awesome.
Jealous.
Well, awesome at the same time as there was no one else for me to ask questions with. Yeah. It's like, oh, hey, how do I do this? Hey, what settings do I use for this? I was like, that's up to me to decide. But yeah, so and then I got recently the 1.4, which they sent me to basically compare and just as a thank you for all the hard work that I've done to help the users and such.
So tell us about that. What's it like? Because I'm seriously jealous of that machine, but also daunted by it because I've never done that side of things really. So
yeah, well, I had never touched a resin printer in my life. I used to outsource to one of my friends. She does 3D printing for movies and such. So I'd always get her to do my resin printing. But then when this came up, one of my friends 3D printed Aspie on Twitter mentioned it. He was like, oh, hey, they're bringing this out. I've got a contact if you want to kind of get hooked up with it. So I emailed them and ended up buying one like straight away. It came to about just over £400 shipped, which when you have no idea, no one's got it, no one's kind of printed with it, nothing about it really is quite an investment. Even though if you know about it, kind of £400 quite a low budget. But to just chuck it into space, it's almost like Kickstarter really.
Yeah, it's a gamble for sure.
Exactly, yeah.
So what's been your experience? I mean, it must have been like a lot of work when you first got it, but are you enjoying it now? Is it a good result?
Yeah, I'm getting really good prints out of it, like to the point where I've compared it to prints off the Form 2 and such, because I've had the test samples, and the prints from this are better because it's a 2K resolution LCD display rather than kind of a laser and all that kind of stuff. So it is a higher resolution, but then you also got the kind of usability as well. You've got more chance of it failing. You've got to mess around with the cheap kind of open source software, and another thing is there's no tilt and peel, which if you're not into resin printers, then basically where it's like basically like a suction cup. You pull in a suction cup vertically, and the tilt and peel on like a Formlabs is basically like picking up the corner and letting it release nicely. Well, this doesn't have it, so if it's a solid part, then it's essentially just pulling a suction cup vertically until it releases, which is quite damaging to the part.
And that's why people often do them at a 45-degree angle,
exactly, right? Yeah. So it's less of the part on the plate at one point, and you're meant to hollow everything out and all that.
Yeah, it's that surface area thing. So with a normal printer, you're thinking about overhangs and it curling. With this, you're having to think about how much surface area sticks. Right, so let's get into the downsides. And we mentioned the toxicity. How do you say it? Toxicity? Is this gloop bad for you?
In terms of silicon?
the stuff that you're using in the
workshop.
The Wanhao.
In the Wanhao.
Yeah.
It's a UV resin, but it's kind of it's toxic, but only if you kind of drink the whole bottle. It's not really like you don't have to kind of come in with a hazmat suit and kind of all that. You mean as long as you've got some gloves on and you mean you keep in the tissues that you wipe away the stuff with, you mean away from children, and you're not like, you mean as long as you're not stupid, then you mean it's not an issue. But it is extremely messy.
Right. So in terms of cleanup, do you have to be careful? Like, is it something that's safe to go down the sink or?
It's with it being UV. You obviously any leftover, because it's quite expensive, you pull that back in the bottle, and then anything that's like, let's say you wiped it up with a cloth or a paper towel, you could just leave them in the sun and then it'll cure. So it won't be all sticky and stuff. You can just leave it to cure, and then just chuck it in the bin. Then
right. It's just getting rid of plastic basically at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so the other stuff in your workshop, that is bad for you, right?
Yeah, the silicons and resins that I use are very, very toxic. Like today I've been doing fiberglass like outer shell molds, and then you use like polyester resin, and that stuff it stinks to high hell, and it's just it's horrible. If you get it on your skin, all your skin just kind of just falls off.
Ooh, right. So so why get into this? Why put yourself through that sort of level of
toxicity?
Yeah.
Well, when I was in university, I got into kind of collecting vinyl toys. There's kind of companies called like Kid Robot, and there's like a vinyl toy kind of scene. And I got into that, and I was collecting these. And then there was the handmade side of it, where people would make their own or sculptures or like customization figures and make a mold of him and duplicate it. Because basically you can sell a figure. I mean, if you customize something and painted it all up and spent months on it and then sold the one, you'd have to sell it for a high price. But then if you made a mold of it, you can make duplicates, and they can be exactly the same as the original, but you can sell more to more people for a lower price. So it's kind of, the thing of getting it to mass markets, if you get me, and more people to have your work for a lower cost, I guess.
Yeah.
And go on.
So you've made the deep sea miner. So that's just essentially a vinyl toy that you're making and producing.
Yeah, it's a resin kit. Yeah, because in university, when I just started going into it, I had found this kind of resin craze, and I wanted to try it. So like I said, in college, I did ceramics, so I was always kind of a hands-on person. So I ordered the resin, I ordered the silicon, and started messing around with it, and found out I enjoyed it. And then I was doing little things for myself, and then I had a friend here saying, "Oh, can you cast mine?" And another friend, "Can you cast this?" And then it snowballed, and I ended up doing a lot. And then I quit my job, and then I do it full time now.
Cool. So it came from you, almost like a hobby, and then it's snowballed from there. So actually it's paying your mortgage now.
Yeah, well, rent, yeah.
Rent,
but,
okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. So, can you talk me through your workflow? How did that deep sea miner come about? Was it something you 3D modeled yourself?
Yeah, but basically last year I go to a toy convention every year called ToyCon UK in London, and that's just basically all my friends from this kind of Kid Robot vinyl scene. I go there every year I've recently started exhibiting. So last year I created a model kit it's just an idea that's been in my head for years, about 6 years. And I named it Nuctopus, so it's like an octopus with a nuclear bomb as a head. So so it's just always been just dabbling around, and every time I tried to draw it down on paper, I could never get it to look the way I saw it in my head, kind of thing. So I spent ages trying to get it right, and then I finally figured it out, sculpted it, and instead of, because in this scene, if you have a DIY figure, which is like a do-it-yourself, it'll always be pristine, it'll be sanded, it'll be like primed in white, ready to paint, and it'll be like lovely. But I always like the idea of the kind of old school garage kits, like in Japanese kits. Yeah. So ones that you get in the box, and you've got kind of like sprues you need to sand off and bits you need to fill with, like, I always like the idea of that being hands on. I like kind of having to, like, imagine you bought an Airfix kit and it was pre-built. It's not,
so you have to finish it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was my first one. That was sculpted in a thing called Monster Clay, which is basically they sculpt all the monsters out for kind of movies and stuff. And then as over the year progressed, that kit went really well. I thought I sold about 36 kits. And it was a 12-part resin kit, and it kind of blew up, and I really enjoyed it. So then I wanted to push myself into 3D modeling. I've always dabbled in it, but I needed a project to kind of really kind of push me into learning it and such. So that's where Deep Sea Miner came about, which he's basically a deep sea diver with as his head is like a sea mine. Yeah. So I made up a little backstory about him being kind of like, a World War II kind of prisoner of war. So they would strap him to the seabed and all this crap basically. But
so they're not from the same universe then? Euctopus and the Deep Sea Miner, they aren't like adversaries or anything?
No, well, they're from the same kind of little world, yeah. Because it's like basically, I've always had an interest in like 1940s, 1950s style kind of art, and like World War II and the missiles and the bombs and stuff. So it's basically like a cross between a nuclear bomb or like a warhead and an organic sculpture. So like, obviously the octopus and the bomb, and then the Deep Sea Miner had like a leathery body and like a suit in the old school diver suits, with a sea mine as a head and all that. So it's just kind of, that's why I enjoy. But I like to kind of work on stuff that I would walk past a kind of a convention or something and say, oh, hey, that's cool. Something I'm personally interested in, rather than kind of what people want to see.
So you 3D modeled it, and then you'll do like prototypes on your 3D printer.
Yeah, I did the kind of like the hard edge modeling in Fusion 360, and then I'll take that into ZBrush and kind of that's where I'd add all the organic kind of sculpture and stuff. And because I used to do a lot of traditional sculpting, I used to do commission sculpting as well. It's the same kind of processes. So things where you need to like carve this out, and like how would you would work a clay sculpture is roughly the same in ZBrush. So I did did it all in there, exported it and printed it on my D7 and all that, and then assembled it, molded it, all that.
So when you're modeling, are you thinking in terms of the limitations of 3D printing, or do you just do the best model you can and then hope for the best?
I'm terrible for that. I kind of work on stuff that I want. I just kind of try and get it out of my head. So sometimes some things can be a bit hard to kind of print or that, but I just kind of want it, because once I'm set on an idea, it needed to look exactly like that. I don't want to kind of hold it back because of this, but obviously like undercuts on the arms and stuff. I tend to work more towards what works in a silicon mold rather than what works resin printed or printed in general.
Right, so when you're actually getting it out of silicon mold, you don't want it to break off or get stuck in there, do you?
Yeah, well, like if it's a big hole in the middle of something, and then obviously there's a little gap in between, the silicon's not going to pull out of that because a big kind of chunk of silicon won't fit through a little hole, if you get me. Or like undercuts underneath a chin and stuff. You just have to be wary of how things pull out of the mold, I guess.
So do you, when you're doing your models, do you sand it with like regular sandpaper? Do you do wet sanding, or how do you finish your own?
Usually it's filler primer. There's, I don't know if you've used it. It's just basically a primer with, a high kind of thickness infill kind of thing, and it's just
like a spray.
You just spray it on in a rattle can kind of thing, and just goes on really thick, but not thick enough to kind of hide the really tiny details. Yeah. So it goes between a few coats of that, wet sanding, and just back and forth and changing color primers so you can see where because I use a yellow primer and then I'll sand it and then I'll yellow primer it again and then gray primer over the top. So when I sand off the gray, I can see where the yellow hasn't sanded, so I know that's not level. And cool. It's just working between, constant back and forth.
Never thought of that. Yeah, I'll have to get a different colour primer, because I've just got myself grey, so I need to get into this side of things.
You can never see how kind of flat or how, if you've got a nice smooth rounded object, and the striations from the print, you think they're smooth. So if you put a different color on top and then sand it back, the original color will still sit in the grooves that you haven't reached. So it's useful for that.
Another pro tip. So you're just using like the spray cans that you'd get from the hobby shop or the like auto repair shop, right?
Yeah, it's nothing kind
just
of
regular stuff.
Yeah.
You're not using an airbrush or anything like that?
I airbrush. I do a lot of metal painting. So realistic metal. There's a company called Owlclad that make it's a metal lacquer with actual metal flake in it. So and that's such a thin kind of lacquer that if you brushed it on by hand, it would look terrible. So that needs to be airbrushed, and I do little bits with airbrush, but You mean I just tend to. I mean, I don't tend to do too much finishing, as in terms of painting. More of my work is kind of the sanding and the ready to mold kind of stuff.
So do you have one of them really high-end airbrushes, or what is it, like dual action with it, when it sucks up the paint and all of that with it?
I've got a few. I've got the kind of the cheaper version of the ones in the little glass jar, and it sucks up with them ones. But then I've got an Iwata gravity fed one, which is about £100, and just for stuff. I mean, you want a nice kind of fade on things, or I don't tend to use it much. Yeah. I used to do a lot more painting when I was back into my customizing, but not so much anymore.
Well, it's nice to know that you haven't got £1,000 one to do this stuff, because you're doing it for a living. There's a lot of snobbery around this stuff, isn't there? And the groups and everything. Cool. So it sounds like you're basically making money out of your hobby, which is awesome.
It is really enjoyable, because then it's good, because being self-employed, I work from home, so it's really hard sometimes to like motivate yourself, because you could always just stay in bed all day, or you could just sit and watch TV all day. But when you enjoy, I look forward to new jobs. I look forward to like making molds. I look forward to different processes and stuff. So that kind of motivates me to get into the workshop when I actually get going.
So do you get commissions? Is that like the main way you get?
Yeah, well, I originally I was doing it for, like I said, I was doing it for friends, and then more friends would come up, and I made a Facebook page for it, and then people would it was just word of mouth. I've never actually advertised it or anything. And then I was getting so much work that I was kind of killing myself for little money, if you get me. Like some people would say, oh, hey, can you mold this for me and cast it? I want 4 of them. So I'd get like 30 quid out of it or something. And then I would end up it'd be a lot of stress, and they'd be tiny little parts. And it was really kind of like daunting and just horrible. And I didn't enjoy going to work. So
and the people like that tend to be the worst customers, the most demanding.
Yeah, the nitpickiest little, it's horrendous. But now I almost work exclusively just for one guy now. Is there an artist he's RYCA artist or RYCA _ artist on Instagram. And he's a really, really big artist from London. And he used to do all his stuff himself, but he prefers to spend more time kind of concepting and making the actual originals. So now I just do, I work exclusively for him, and yeah, it's been great.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, because one of the things that happens when people turn a hobby into a business is sometimes it takes the shine off the hobby. But it sounds like you've still got a passion for it. Yeah,
well, I was at that point where I was kind of like, do I give up? Do I just kind of quit work and do it back to doing like for friends and myself, where I enjoy it again and get like a normal job? Or do I kind of, I knew I needed to kind of make a decision there and then, otherwise I would end up kind of, the last thing you want to do is just go to work every day unhappy, especially when you're self-employed.
Yeah.
So, so cool.
I think that's important for everybody that's thinking about 3D hubs and all of these, ideas of making money with 3D printing, that you don't want to kill the passion for it.
No. Yeah, you don't want to come in, look at your print and just be disgusted by it. You want to kind of see it as a potential to make something or enjoy using it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think pricing yourself and your time is really important, because like you said, you don't want to be doing all that stress and work and effort for £30.
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's the good thing about this guy I'm working with now. The money is really good. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about money or anything, but the money is really good. It's paying my wages. It's keeping my family happy, and I get to do what I love. I get to work on stuff I enjoy, and the guys are like an absolute breeze to work for as well. He's just, he understands everything. Obviously, he's a caster himself, so he understands how things work. So he's not going to send me models that can't be cast or are like an absolute pain. He sculpts them in terms of how they should be cast, or makes it a lot easier, which is lovely.
Cool. So what's next for you then? What have you got fun that's coming up?
I've got new printers coming, which is awesome. I've got the Moai SLA coming to, because basically I was speaking to Mark, and he's obviously my model making and my sculpting and my resin casting, all that stuff. So he wants my input on the way I see it, and obviously I do it a lot. Yeah. So he believes I can help him. So that should be really enjoyable. Not limited by little parts that don't stick to that I need to kind of sort out on the D7. It should open it up a bit more for me. And
you've got any more cool toys coming out? Have you got a follow-up to the Deep Sea Miner?
Oh, I'm not even thinking about that. That Deep Sea Miner took me a year to make.
Oh, so no problem. You can knock them out.
Because it's 28 separate parts.
Oh.
So it was like modeling them all. And in the end, when I was ready to release it, I sold 18 sets now, I think. So 28 times 18, I'm terrible with maths, but yeah, it's a lot. But I ended up printing kind of about 10 or 11 parts of it on the D7 because they were so small. Some of them were about 0.5 millimeter thick, and they were just, I didn't even want to begin to try and mold and cast that. So I ended up just printing them in, because the beautiful thing about the D7, it's with an LCD display, you can print a whole bed's worth of stuff, and it takes the same amount of time as if you only printed one.
Yeah.
Whereas on like a SLA printer, like the Formlabs, the laser would have to go around the one part and then move to the next one, so it obviously makes it, it takes a lot longer. But yeah, the D7, you can do as many as you want, as long as you can fit it on the bed, and it's great.
Cool. So it's almost like small scale manufacture at that point.
Yeah. It's just, I was printing, I got photos on my Twitter, I was printing kind of like 40, 50 parts a day, just wash them off, cure them, stick them in a bag, and just ready to go.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time. We've come up to about 30 minutes, so I don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah, no problem.
Any final thoughts? Anybody wanting to get into making their own models? What do you advise to anybody that's listening?
Just be yourself. So too many people try and trying to conform to what people. They'll see on the internet. It's like, oh, this is really popular, I'm going to go and make this. But just make what you enjoy, and just don't be disheartened if people don't like it straight away. Because it takes a long time for you to kind of find your niche or what you enjoy. So just, if something isn't popular or something people, and also learn to accept constructive criticism. Too many people you'll tell something, like you'll say, oh, this needs work, or this, could be better. And they'll take that to heart, and then they'll be disappointed, or they'll get kind of angry and defensive. But, obviously people are there to help you and, just to better you in life, I guess. So.
Yeah, that's great advice, because your stuff is really instantly recognizable. You have a style, and I think that's awesome. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody for listening. And please do give us a review, give us some constructive feedback, as Evan just said, and share with your friends, and listen out for the next episode, when I'm sure there'll be more of us rather than just me talking to Evan. But thank you again, Evan.
Thank you very much. Bye.